First of all, thank you for being here and welcome to the Disruptor discussions. We are really in the groove now in our second month of doing these. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today to you in a moment. And also, I want to apologize. We got a bit of a late start today. We had a little tech issue and we are working that out or got that worked out. And thank you for your patience. I really want to be respectful of your time. And I'm just really glad that everyone's here to learn from this incredible guest that we have today, Shoshanna. All right, a little bit of an intro. My name is Jennifer Fry, and I am the CEO of Appreciated Asset Business Solutions. We've been in business since 2018, after I'd really spent my whole career in business development, sales, some form or function. I developed an expertise in top of the funnel activities, prospecting and appointment setting, and really learned that I had a gift, and my zone of genius was in opening doors for people, creating connections and seeing connections for people and for their businesses that they didn't necessarily see for themselves. So we launched Appreciated Asset, and we set new business appointments for our clients with their prospect wish list. But in that time, obviously there's a lot of ways to increase revenue in a business. And knowing that there are zero problems in a business that more revenue cannot solve, zero. I knew that there are a lot of other incredible minds out there and people with incredible expertise that can also create more revenue in your business as well. And I really, after spending years connecting with some incredible people all across the country and internationally as well, wanted to bring people all together to learn from each other about how, again, you can create more revenue in your business in a lot of different ways. So that's why we've started this masterclass. The Disruptor Discussions is our newest way to introduce you to these experts who are just going to rock your world and help you grow your businesses. What's a disruptor? Disruptor is someone who stands out from the status quo, someone who's committed to doing things above and beyond the industry standard. Most of us operate in spaces where there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people who say they do what you do, but we all know that they don't. But how do you stand out? You stand out by being 5% cheaper or 10% faster, like snooze fest, no one cares. And what that does is that creates transactions, but it does not create relationships. Being a disruptor, committing to do things better than the industry standard of what it always has been, is how we show up for ourselves and for our clients to deliver results that are above and beyond what's expected. And thinking outside the box and getting really, really creative. All right, so some news for us. YouTube, I'm still on this YouTube kick, you guys. At Appreciated Asset, please, I am now in the double digits for subscribers. My son Max is so super not impressed with this, but he will tell me to tell you, like and subscribe, and I appreciate all of your support so far. Oh my gosh. Total sidebar, but I swear I look at some of the videos he watches on YouTube and they've got like millions and millions of views and it's absolutely mind-numbing and I could cry. So I'm really, really looking forward to growing this platform and putting some really great content out there about business growth and how to really create intentional growth in your business. Okay, our guest today is Shoshanna French. And Shoshanna and I met years ago through a networking group that we were still both are a part of. We are both avid Starbucks fans, which I love that about her. And I've spent some really special mornings over Starbucks coffee when we're in the same city. And I swear she's just one of those people that when I met her, I was like, where have you been all my life? And at the same time, I felt like I'd known her forever too. She had that level of comfort and familiarity. And the really interesting thing about Shoshanna is that she specializes in learning how to tune into your intuition. And she's going to share all of this with you guys. But the really cool thing is you might think that someone with this focus and this expertise is going to be like super woo and really out there and, just in this cosmic universe. And she's just not like that. She's so relatable, whether you are woo adjacent like I am. I even brought my crystals on today because I am. The more I learn about all things metaphysical, I'm so in. but she also combines this incredible strategy and really common sense methodology to put all of her wisdom into practice. So I have about 1 billion questions that I cannot wait to put you on the spot and ask for. But for right now, I'm going to read your bio. All right. So Shoshanna French's goal is to cultivate wildly successful leaders through the practical power of intuitive decision-making and authentic communication. As the founder of Simple Spirit, a keynote speaker and executive coach to million and billion-dollar business founders, CEOs, and business professionals, she generates unpredictable and profound results for entrepreneurs who are ready to be aligned in purpose and action. She combines her 20+ years of professional and personal development with intuitive training to support visionary founders who are disrupting businesses as usual. You guys see the synergy here? In her work, leaders transform their beliefs, change their habits, and deepen a connection to their own inner wisdom and self-awareness, so they are free to fulfill the vision they have for their personal and professional lives. So Shoshanna, I'm going to hand the stage over to you, and I'm so excited to learn. And then we'll take it from there. You guys, if you have any questions, please make sure to drop them in the Q&A section, and we will make sure to get to them towards the end of today's call. Shoshanna, take it away.
I love you. I appreciate you. We've had some very good conversations over Starbucks, I must say. So I will say, for anyone watching now, watching later, conversations, if you're a disruptor, you know what this is like. But I will specifically say that when you are a disruptor in an industry that's already a little bit fringy, being somebody who is intuitive, being someone who teaches people how to trust their intuition, you are a disruptor of disruptors. And so I feel like that's a big part of my journey, is the willingness to ask the questions of people who don't like questions being asked of them. In my industry, for the most part, people, the stuff people are talking about have been settled in for a long, long time. This is ancient wisdom and training that people have like passed down and passed down and passed down. And in my experience, when I learned when I was 18, it was really convoluted, confusing, and hard. And so that's not my only disruption or disrupting of things. But what I really wanted to do when I started teaching people is I wanted to remove this stigmatism that people have, where you have to follow a particular kind of spirituality in order to access something that, as a tool, we all have, no matter what you believe. And so that was my first disruption. And it did actually distinguish me from other people in my industry. I was like the oddball. And not just because I did something really different. So I'm really glad to be here and in this conversation.
So why don't you start by telling us kind of how you got here and what it is about your expertise in really like teaching people how to lean into that intuition.
Oh, that, like, I'm going to do my best, because you know this about me. I don't tell short stories, but how I ended up here, right here where I am, is by following my intuition, really. And in the beginning, I didn't necessarily know that's what I was doing, because I was really young. And it's different. You know, it's like they say, when you go to medical school and you're doing your residency, what they say is you see one, you do one, you teach one. And I think that is similar to what I learned when I started. I was a psychic. So when I started, I did readings for people, because that's what you do when you're in my industry. You start with like doing that. You start with honing your own ability to immediately read what's going on with people. And so, you know, when people ask me like, how did you get to be training people? How did you end up doing this? What I did is I did a lot of readings, thousands of readings. And what I learned was there were just these wicked smart people who were up to like epic stuff in the world. And they were making the dumbest decisions I've ever seen. And I was just so bummed for them. Like decisions that after the fact, I would ask them, like, did you know that was going to happen? And people would say, well, you know, I had this feeling, but but, but my business partner talked me into it, but my spouse thought it was a good idea, but I didn't trust myself. And what I realized is all these people didn't have access to this thing inside of me that often would tell me not to do those dumb things. So it just became this calling, like I got really frustrated about it. And so on their behalf, on other people's behalf. And so I just started training people. And in the beginning, it was, I trained a lot of, small business owners. And then they would tell their bigger business owner friends. And then, then I met other people in much larger organizations. And what I started to realize is that the people who were doing, are we allowed to curse on this show?
I don't see why not.
Okay, good. I just always like to check. So the people, the visionary leaders, the disruptors who are doing epic shit in the world, they were the people who were most interested in learning to trust their intuition. And they were the most fun to coach. They're the most fun to work with. And that's kind of how I ended up here. It's a little bit like there's this quote by Steve Jobs, which is you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. And if I look back right now, I can see all the dots that led me to now. And it was a little bit like being blindfolded and, jumping from one lily pad to the next, to go from one side of the river to the other. I did not know where it was going to lead me necessarily, but I just trusted that my feet would find the spot, that I would be in the right spot in the right moment. And that's often, intuition doesn't always give you everything at once because it doesn't work like that. So that's how I ended up where I am now, working with leaders, saying yes to things, even if I didn't entirely like cognitively understand or know how I was going to do it. I just said yes.
Okay. So I've got about 1 billion questions. And if you guys have been on other disruptor discussions, we're going to do today a little bit differently than we've done it before, because typically before we'll have people, that give presentations. But today I really wanted us to talk because I've got a lot of questions, but here's where I want to start. You talked about that feeling. People have that feeling that this isn't the right choice, or I should be doing this instead. How do you delineate that feeling from scarcity thinking, from fear-based mindset? Like, I'm really interested in, and I've had this conversation with you before. So tell us all, how do you figure it out? What feeling it is that you trust?
Here's what's wild, and this is how intuition works. So I did a post today literally about this. I literally said, the question that people always ask me is, how do you tell? I literally wrote this. If you go to my social, you will find this today. Literally says, how do you tell the difference between I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So how do you tell the difference between intuition and everything else? Because intuition comes in as a feeling. So how do you tell the difference between like a reaction emotionally versus an intuition? How do you tell the difference? It comes in as thoughts. So how do you tell the difference between an inspired thought and a rando thought? How do you tell the difference between your opinion and intuition? And there's like that right there could be a whole entire class. But on the basic level, what I say is that intuition itself is about connection to your truth. Period. The end. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that your being knows what truth is. And for the most part, if you learn how to understand the anatomy, what are the pieces and parts, and then the mechanics, how it all fits together, you will over time be able to tell the difference when a random thought comes into your head and an actual intuitive thought, or an intuitive feeling, or an intuitive picture in your mind, a sight, or an intuitive hearing, like being able to listen or hear something. But there is no one way. The primary and first thing to do is to understand how your intuition is built, and then interact with it a lot. That's it. I mean, here's the thing. I really wish, and I can see look on your face. I feel like this is exactly what happened when you asked me this before. So an intuitive decision maker is building a habit. And the way that our brain is designed is that we already have built habits for how we make decisions. Some people are list people, right? Some people are, you're a list person. Some people are, let's just go quick and figure it out and I'll work it out later. That's more like me.
I do
Some
that
people
too.
are, some people are like, call a friend. Some people are research people. My sister researches everything before she makes a decision. Wherever you fit in that, you don't do it by like happenstance. You built that habit a long time ago. So when you want to use intuition to make decisions, you can't just approach it like, how do I learn what intuition is and then start using it? You have to think about it like you're building a habit, just like, starting any habit. If you want to exercise more, you have to actually fit it in. So what I tell almost every client that I work with is we're going to talk about how you make decisions. And right before you use the thing you always use, you're going to do this practice. You're going to, one, pause, close your eyes, get quiet as best as you can. You're going to ask good questions that are curiosity based, and then you're going to listen. And the listening matters because once you know how your intuition works, you'll recognize it as distinct from random thoughts, feelings, external noise. And then if after you do that, you want to go back to how you typically make decisions, that's fine. Because usually if you've really heard and received that like intuitive knowing or understanding, it guides you to which of those options of your usual decision making will work best in this situation. So it will let you know if a pro con is a great approach. It will let you know, no, call that person who popped in your brain the moment you asked, what is the best first step in making this decision? And your buddy Joe pops in your head and you go, oh, I'm going to reach out to Joe. You don't know why, but that's what you're going to do. So the way I think about it, and this is the last piece, trust. So building a habit requires doing it over and over and over again. But the difference with intuition versus other things like lifting weights, like that's a habit you build, but then you start to see and you're like, oh yeah. With intuition, it's not like that because it's not linear. So it just requires a lot of trust over time. And then really wild things happen. Really wild things happen. Clients say something like, this happened the other day. I was in a conversation with someone and this thought occurred to me, ask them about ringing the closing bell for NASDAQ. Hey, how do you guys decide who gets to ring the bell for NASDAQ? And the guy goes, people ask. And she said, I'm asking, how do I get to ring the bell for NASDAQ? And he was like, well, you just asked. Sure. When do you want to do it? And she
Love
got
it.
to ring the bell to close NASDAQ. I mean, can you pay for that kind of PR? No, you cannot. But that is an example of following, practicing, and trusting your intuition. That's it. That's what it looks like. It's not linear.
Could you give me an example of a time in your life, and maybe recently, that you've done this for yourself? Because what I'm hearing is there's two things that are coming through to me. One is, I've always believed that things happen for you, not to you. I haven't always believed that actually, but I've learned to understand and really know that it is true. And that's tough to see sometimes when things aren't going the way you believe they should be going.
Yeah.
But then also, what I was hearing you say is that there's some things that they repeat for you, they come back for you over and over. So it may not just be that one thought, but that you've had that same thought or that same inclination repeatedly. And that's what may lead you to follow that. That's maybe your intuition coming through. So could you kind of walk me through even something simple, like it doesn't have to be profound, but I'd love to learn kind of how you've put this into practice in your own life.
So my office is a good example, the office I'm sitting in right now. So I had this thought. I used to be in a bigger room in our home. And every time I was in that office, there was this feeling like this is the wrong room in the house for me to be in. And I was like, that's weird. It's the second biggest bedroom. Why would I want to give up the second biggest bedroom? It was really nice and roomy. And I was like, I don't know why. It doesn't feel right. I don't know why. And this is before my husband really started a business and needed a second office, like an additional office. And now he has a healing room and a painting room. And I was like, I don't. And so I just offered it to him just to see how it would feel. And he was like, are you kidding me? Why would you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I actually have no idea. And so I made him help me. We moved everything in here. This room has been rearranged 8 times. And I'm not kidding. It's a very small, it's not like a tiny room, but it's a small room. And being arranged 8 times is like a little bit ridiculous, but it actually, in fact, and every time we rearranged, it was to have it feel the way the feeling I kept having in my body of this room was the room for my office. That was it. It was like he helped me move this stuff over here. And I was like, yep, that feels right. And then he said, can I use this other office for my painting studio? Yeah. And then all of a sudden he painted 30 paintings, like in a very short amount of time. And he launched a website. And I was like, oh, got it. Like I was in the way of him to have the space to launch his art business. Did I know that logically? Well, of course not, because that's not how that works. But intuitively, something in me knew that that was the wrong room for me to have. But it took something in this room to arrange it and have it be in a space where like the feeling of it is it calls me into the space of creativity and connection with myself. That's the kind of room that I wanted to have. And that other room didn't do that. I didn't know why, but it didn't. But this one does. But it took 8 times to rearrange it. So sometimes, like that feeling you said, like where something pops up, and I pay really close attention when something pops up more than once. Sometimes for me, that is like the indication, like, wait, what is that? Huh. But I have tools. So when something pops up that many times and I've kind of been ignoring it, I sit down and I use a tool. I just ask, like, is there something that I am aware of that I haven't acknowledged? Because sometimes awareness comes, but acknowledgement is like front of the brain, like conscious understanding, cognition. Sometimes my awareness is like back in the brain, like talking to me, and I'm not bringing it to the forefront to make it usable. And that was one of those instances. It was like, what is this awareness? And it was like, this is not your office. That's what they said. This is not your office. Okay, great. And then I moved offices.
And you know the coolest thing about that, not only did you follow your intuition and do what was right for you, but you also opened and created this space for Stephen, for him to have this area to create. So it was like this ripple effect of you following that, how that also created areas for other people to expand as well. That's remarkable.
And I feel like that is the purpose of our intuition. And that's why I like working with leaders, because leaders are not using their intuition for themselves necessarily, for like their personal gain, though that's fine if they do. But for the most part, what they're doing is they're trying to use their intuition to guide them towards an alignment with a vision or a purpose. And that has ripple effects on other people. And that is what I strive to listen to my intuition for myself and for clients is, if I say yes to this, what does that create? And sometimes that's the tool. I have to sit down, take my paper out, and like start writing. Like, if I say yes to this, what does that create? Because my current brain, my logic cannot see it, because logic is really good for, solving problems and avoiding making a mistake. But intuition arises from what's possible. I wasn't solving a problem by giving him that office. We didn't know he needed a painting studio yet. Not like that. So I was actually listening for what has our home, because this is always what I'm listening for, like what has our home have like the best use of space, where it's really a place of like sanctuary and invitation and welcome. And then I just sort of listened for that in the background. So it wasn't like I hadn't asked the question. I always ask that question. It's sort of like in me. And we do that all the time. We just don't know we're doing it. I'm sure you do it with both your partner and your son. You ask things like, what does he need for his happiness? What does he need to be taken care of? But it's in the background. You're not asking it in the forefront. And then you get little things, mama intuition, and you adjust something and you don't think much about it. But when we start applying that to business, it changes because there's an attachment there. There's like we don't want to fail like in a bigger way, because it's, pretty public and pretty obvious. And so when we start applying intuition to business, it changes a little bit how we approach it or engage with it versus how we're, more intrinsically using it in our daily life with things that we don't have as much attachment to.
Beautiful. I'm going to ask you my 3 questions that I ask every guest, and then I will open things up. So again, any questions can go into the Q&A. My first question is, how does your expertise in intuition bring more revenue into a business?
When people are focused on doing things in a way that everybody else is, intuition can see around the bend. So intuition can give you the most efficient and clearest way to do things that will increase revenue. It does it over and over and over again because it gives you access to innovation. That is how it creates more money in business.
And you alluded to this earlier before we got started, but tell me, how are you a disruptor in your space? How are you disrupting, this focus? Because people talk about this. There's other people who are talking about intuition, but how are you really disrupting what the common practice is for intuitive decision making?
Lots of people talk about the need to do long amounts of meditation and go deeply within and talk to certain whatever beings. And what I often say is that intuition, much like the way that you just make regular decisions, it's a capacity or a skill that you already possess. So all I'm doing is connecting you back to a skill you already have and teaching you how to use it in a better way. That is saying something very, very different, because for a lot of people in my space, they're talking more about teaching you something you don't know and then attaching to it a requirement of a particular kind of spiritual practice. I am really woo. I believe in a spiritual practice. I have a spiritual practice, but you do not require one to tap into your intuition, because that is not where it comes from. It's not a requirement. That's how I'm disrupting it. It's not what other people in my industry say.
And I would think that probably helps with resistance. I bet you there's a lot of people who are traditional and lifelong thinkers out there, right? Who need this knowledge and this understanding. However, the resistance to the woo and the resistance to, spiritual practice, which may or may not align for them in this moment, I would think that having that framework really breaks down barriers for people.
It enables me to work with people, I think, that would never consider being trained in intuition.
What would you say is the number one thing that we can all do today? Everyone, when we are off of this call, we have an hour free later today. Yeah, right. And we have 15 minutes free later today. Who am I kidding? What can we all do? What can we all put into practice today? What's the first step we can all take to start to lean into intuitive thinking?
This is going to sound like too simple, but don't resist it. Curiosity. So for the most part, we don't like asking questions we don't know the answers to. And so inquiry is the very first thing that you can do. What does that look like? It means asking questions intentionally that you don't have the answers to. Things like, what is my first step in growing this next venture? How do I create deeper connection with my partner? What do I do to feel more vital and alive today? How do I create greater joy in my daily living? Those are the kind of questions, the deeper, curious kind of questions that when you start to ask them, it begins to open up the possibility of that what you don't know could actually elicit new possibilities, really. And that would be the very first thing I would recommend.
And what you had said earlier, just to bring this back around, is that you can do that through writing, through silence, through speaking out loud. Like you can use the modality that feels right to you. right? Kind
Yep.
of your love language for
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah. There are lots of tools. So, but if you use a tool with attachment, it doesn't really help you. So lots of people talk about like, oh, I got that deck. I got that deck that was like the Oracle cards, with like Louise Hay on them. And then they use them and they're like, but it's not really helping. And it's always goes back to the same thing. Or I did that practice that you recommended, show, but all I heard was what I already knew. And what I always say, it doesn't actually matter. You have to cultivate curiosity. And what I mean by that, and let me say it more plainly, consider that you don't actually know. Consider that you don't know. And that if you're willing to not know, which is very uncomfortable, let's be real, it is uncomfortable to not know. But if you're willing to consider that you don't know, it will have you ask different questions. So, like, as an example, that's like a little bit far out there, people ask things like, um, to grow my business to $500,000 revenue this year, what do I need to do? And I always say that's the wrong question, because it presupposes that like that you need, that you're like trying to solve the problem called I need to get to a $500,000. But
Right.
instead, there's what you don't know about your business that if you were willing to consider you didn't know, it would have you ask a different question. It would have you innovate. So, like, a more intuitive question is, what is the first step to center me as a new thought leader in my area of expertise? How do
Okay.
I meet people who are my perfect fit clients? What could I be focused on in my business that would create more joy for me in my work? We're not connecting things. That
You're not
connection
tying to the
happens.
result, like the metric or
Right.
the, right.
Exactly.
You're
Yep.
keeping a lot more open-ended because honestly, if you create the metric, you're also limiting yourself,
Well, and
right?
I love measuring things. So create all the metrics you want, but what happens with business owners when they start asking questions is they're asking questions that are really firmly lodged in their logic, because this question is about figuring something out. How do I solve this problem? How do I avoid uh, failing at my metric? But what they don't wonder is, okay, there's my metric. I'm going to let that go for a second. And instead, I'm going to get curious and inquire into the source of, the core of why I am in business in the first place. How do I build meaningful relationships with my clients? How do I create, my voice in a flooded market? Like, not how do I achieve that goal, because that goal is not going anywhere. Instead, be willing to consider that you really don't know and let yourself inquire. Curiosity is the source of your intuition. True curiosity. It's like it's how children learn things, because they're genuinely curious. They're not trying to accumulate knowledge to be smarter than everybody else. They're accumulating understanding and knowledge because they genuinely want to know. They want to know. They're really curious. So what I ask people quite often is, what is a thing that you do that you let yourself not know? Like, is it when you travel and you're in a city you've never been to? Is it when you go to a restaurant? Is it when you read a book? Is it when you cook? Is it when you meet new people? What is the place where you're willing to be totally in curiosity? And then see if you can recreate that experience in your body, and then repeat it when you ask questions to inquire into business, because that feeling is what there is to replicate.
I love that. So I can really get on board with that because as a business owner, there's so many things that I'm holding tight, right? That I've got a grip on. And then there's a lot of other things where I'm like, you make the decision. I don't want to know. Like, just I love the whole idea about what Steve Jobs always did about wearing the black all day because it's like less decisions to make, right? Because we do have so many decisions to make all day, and we get so attached to the end, the metric, the outcome. But using another part of your life where you really don't have that grip, and applying that to your business in those questions, I can do. Okay. Last question from me. And then again, you guys, if you have any questions, please add them in here Shoshana is incredible. We've put all of our contact information in the chat. So if you want to reach out to her separately, she would, I'm sure, love to meet with you one-on-one. Okay, you've heard this from me, and I just really want you to bring this home. So for someone who has always tended on the anxious side, tended on the, I don't want to say doomsday, but it has always tended to look for the next shoe to drop, right? And also someone who's opening up to the idea, like I had mentioned earlier, that the universe is everything's happening for you, not to you. That it's going to be great no matter what. So for me, it's like, do I want to white knuckle this ride, or do I want to just sit back and enjoy it? If I know it's going to be great no matter what, am I going to freak out over every little road bump? How do you make intuition your new superpower? How do you how do you help your brain rewire from the smallest decisions in your personal life to big, really crucial and critical business decisions? How do you take your brain from operating this way for, let's say, a few decades at this point?
Okay. Yeah.
To really opening up to this idea that we can do it very differently the way we've all been from what we've always done before.
So I just want to say one thing first, which is the way our brain is wired is for negative bias.
Right.
It's already wired that way. So that part you're not going to rewire, and it's part of our design as humans that keep us safe. So, evolutionary biology, brain biology says that it was the thing that had us, like, we heard something coming up the hill and it was out of our line of sight. Is that a saber-toothed tiger? Is it a human? And we reacted very, very like, oh, it's definitely a saber-toothed tiger. And then we were prepared, and then it came up and it was our buddy, like, hey, let's go hunting. So you're not going to get rid of that. So just like, I think if anybody is like, I wish I didn't do that, what's wrong with me? Nothing. That's how your brain is designed. So you can like let go that there is something very specific about you that your brain's broken. It's not. That's how brains are designed. It keeps us safe, right? So how do you build a habit? So if people are readers, one of my favorite books I read in 2019 was The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Is really, really good. And the latest, science about habits is what they call, all of us have keystone habits, like those habits that are in that you don't have to think about. One of mine is coffee. Like, I don't have to think about it. I wake up, I think about coffee. So when I wanted to build the habit of exercise, I attached it to coffee. So then before I got my coffee, I woke up, I exercised, and then I got my coffee. So I attached it to an already existing habit. So why do I say that? Well, I think everyone should just think about, how do you typically make decisions? What is the process or the typical, method in which you make them, small ones and big ones, right? So for example, you're standing in, Whole Foods, and you're in front of the wall of supplements, and your friend's like, you really need magnesium, it will help you sleep. And then there's like 8 choices. What is your automatic in making that decision? Do you pick up every bottle and read the back? Do you look each thing up at the consumer report? Like, how do you do that? And right before you do whatever is typical for you, make a deal with yourself. Practice doing this instead. Pause and ask, which of these feels right? Which of these feels right? Take the bottle down, hold it. Does this feel right? Notice your brain has a lot to say. It really wants you to look stuff up online. It really wants you to read everything in tiny print on the back of the bottle. But before you do that, just pause and ask the question, is this the right one for me? Will this, and honestly, what might happen is you might hold every bottle, all 8 options for magnesium, and your body's like, I don't like any of those. Like, your body doesn't like any of them. And then you just do this practice called trust it and don't buy any of them. Leave the store and don't buy magnesium. Period. That's it. That's how you do it. And you build it over and over and over and over again. When you make a really big decision, like when I make really big decisions, I like to mind map stuff, like so
Yeah.
I can see it visually. And I just do that. I write a bunch of stuff out, I look at it. But right before I do that, I take a moment and I get centered and quiet my mind, because when my mind is racing, whatever decision I'm going to make will probably be a reaction. So I just take a
Mm.
moment, I get quiet, which for me just looks like breath. I like move my feet, I breathe. If it's a really, really big decision, I go exercise. Like I burn my brain out. Like I exercise enough that I'm sweating and I'm short of breath. Then I come back, I look at my mind map and I go, okay. And then I ask a curiosity led question. And then I do that again and again and again and again and again. And every time before you make any decision, just pause and instead try using your intuition first. That's it. That's how you do it. And eventually, what will happen is you'll go, wait, hold on a second. Before I give you the answer, give me just a second. And you put your hand on your belly, and I do this even at restaurants sometimes. I go, body, what do you want? Like, I know what my food plan is and I know what I had earlier, but actually, what do you want? And if I take that moment, then my intuition gets the opportunity instead of my brain, over and over and over and over again. And that's it. That's how you do it.
I love it. Thank you
You're
so much.
welcome.
It's like my brain is kind of on fire right now. So I may have to clear the afternoon and take this offline. Um, Something else has come to me that I want to address, and it's something that we, again, feel free to reach out to Shoshana, feel free to reach out to me, or just practice this on your own. But I, as someone who has been in relationships personally and in business where I learned to not trust myself, where I was told to not trust myself, where, there were situations where there was gaslighting happening. And as someone who's spent years relearning to trust myself and listen to my intuition, I will tell you that at first it didn't feel like intuition. And I think that's what I'm learning from you is that, and I think everyone at some point in their lives, childhood or adulthood, has gone through situations where they've had to relearn to trust themselves, either made a big mistake or been sucked into a situation that, was not healthy. And so thank you for kind of empowering us to learn how to tune in and listen to ourselves again, because I have been in that aisle. I have been looking at the bottles of magnesium. For me, it was eye makeup remover. And I have a very specific memory of not being able to make a decision, but it wasn't because I was taking the time. And now every time I go back and I make those decisions, I truly feel empowered. It's such a simple thing, but to relearn how to do life now on my own terms, has been exciting and scary without someone else to tell
Yeah.
you doing it wrong. Right? So if anyone else out there has been in that situation, I hold space for you, and it does get better.
It does. It does. And eventually, what happens is whatever your bias is about your decision making, whether someone's like, hurry up because people think you should be faster, or people tell you that you're too impulsive and that you should, slow down. Whether it's that they're like, you need to ask other people because you are really impulsive when it comes to this kind of thing, or whatever all that is, whatever I don't know, the messaging you got either in childhood or terrible freaking relationships, whatever the case may be, you can rebuild your ability to trust the process of your decision making. And I just think it's worthwhile saying, and for the folks who are listening and they may have questions but don't know what kind of questions to ask, um, you could even ask, I'm dealing with this in my business. How could I use intuition in that? Or what do you do when, intuition is telling you one thing and what's on paper is telling you another? So those are the kind of questions that people like to ask. But back to the other thing, which is, when you build on a fundamental level, just trust in yourself, not even just trust in your intuition, but trust in yourself and your process and acceptance of who you are, it does actually allow you to apply intuition. So if someone, and I've said this to clients, for sure, I know this for myself, which is if you have trauma from past relationships that's unhealed, it can actually affect your ability to hear and listen and use your intuition. It really can. So, part of the process of becoming intuitive decision makers is to recognize what is because I'm not being curious, what is it because I'm being really attached, and what actually is emotional reactivity from big T and little t trauma that I need to address first. And that way you stop making yourself wrong when you're, you want to immediately appease, right? They find that now that there are 5 reactions in the sympathetic nervous system: fight, flight, freeze, appease, and fawn. So now there's these 5. And if you're someone who always is appeasing, but you thought that was you like really using your logic and helping people, but actually it is a reaction, then you learn that and you heal what's at the source of it. And then it makes, applying your intuition easier. You don't have to wait till it's fixed to use your intuition. It just makes distinguishing between the reaction and intuition easier.
So, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You guys, and there's no questions, so I'm assuming that means God Jen, she has asked every single question there could ever be asked about intuition. Exhaustive. Or you just did such a great job of really explaining how we look within that we don't really have to ask you. But I'll still ask you. Thank you for being here. You guys, please reach out to Shoshanna if you want to connect further. Next week, we have Krista Grasso coming. So that will be on 5/29. She's going to be teaching us how to scale without burnout, which is something that we could all, I'm sure, get some pointers on. And thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much. And you guys have the best day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.